Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. We are happy to have Ron Nash and John McNamara, Senior Fellows from the Gilder Lehrman Institute. And we're going to do a quick little mini session about essential questions. And the question is, what is their process for writing a great essential question? So Ron and John, would you mind taking it from here?
Sure. John, you want to jump? Because John
Sure.
is actually the master of this. So I'm sort of the acolyte when it comes to this. But John, go ahead. Take the lead, please.
Okay, the purpose of why teaching with an essential question is so crucial. Number one, a lot of times students, even AP students, will read 3, 4, 5 sections of a chapter. They are flooded with a unending litany of historical facts and information, and they don't know what is important, and they don't know how to prioritize the information. By teaching with an essential question, we are helping students prioritize what is the most important information and concepts that they have just read about in their textbook chapter, online, whatever. So this is the philosophy behind it. When you question, you promote people to think. And think about for a second, when somebody asks you a question, even if they walk up, even if you meet somebody on the street and they pose a question to you, you involuntarily start thinking. So with that concept, if I could phrase a lesson around an essential question that's thought-provoking, open-ended, and the evaluative, I can promote students to think. The more that I can promote students to think, the more that they will most likely become engaged in the lesson. The more that they become engaged in the lesson, they will become interested. And the more that they become interested, the likelihood is that the more that they will learn. So that's the philosophy behind it. How do you do it? Okay, there are basically, these are some of the things that I've used. I've read the information that's in chapter 17, sections 1 and 2. I then ask myself, based on this historical content, what do I think as the teacher are the most important pieces of information and concepts that are in this reading or in these sections? And then I say to myself, based on this important content, what issue or issues or questions are being raised? So content can be put into an interrogative from a declaratory statement. So what issue is being raised or issues are being raised by this content? And then I work with that mentally, and then I develop a thought-provoking question based on the content that I think is most important for students to learn. So taking the declarative content and putting it in the form of a open-ended, evaluative, interrogative question. Okay, the next important step, two, once I have that essential question, I then ask myself this question all right, what information do the students need to know in order to develop a viewpoint on that essential question? And that question then gets me to start thinking about what are the most important things that I need to teach? Uh, where are my priorities of what I want to include in the lesson? What can I, like omit? In other words, I'm like a director or an orchestra leader. I'm making decisions about the content. And the first decision is, can I take this content and place it into a focus and a lens of a thought-provoking question for students to think about? Because the more they think, the more they'll become engaged. Now, this is hard in the beginning, but I found from my own experiences, the more I do it, the easier that it becomes. And now when I'm watching a video or a documentary or reading a book, my mind just starts thinking, okay, this could be, all right, reformed or reframed in the form of a thought-provoking question. So the first step is, what issue or questions are being raised by the content? And then secondly, once I have that statement, can I put that in the form of a thought-provoking question that's open-ended? And then secondly, what what information do the students need to know to develop a viewpoint on that essential question? And I found the more that I practice this, the easier that it becomes. So in the resources that we shared, there's a document called Essential Questions in United States History. That is a menu. I think it has about 181 questions, 180 questions. There's some overlap, but if you went down that, I can very briefly demonstrate how this works. So for example, let's say that you had an essential question. Would you have been a revolutionary in 1776? Okay, so they're reading about the causes of the American Revolution. I think,
Did that just come up? I tried to share it. So,
yes, it did.
okay,
It's
great. Yeah.
number 12. Would you have been a revolutionary in 1776? Okay. Then I asked myself, since I now have that question, I've been reading about the causes of the American Revolution. What question could I frame and pose for students? Well, would you have been a revolutionary? All right. The content is going to be the causes of the American Revolution. So if I ask myself, what information do the students need to know to develop a viewpoint on that essential question? Would you have been a revolutionary in 1776? All right. First idea, they need to know the causes of the American Revolution. Okay. Now that will lead me to thinking about, well, what sources should I include? Okay. Maybe I'll include a map of the Proclamation of 1763. Maybe I'll include an excerpt from the Stamp Act. Maybe I'll include some of the illustrations and cartoons that are readily available about the Boston Tea Party. Maybe I'll include an excerpt from the Townsend Acts. So the essential question then helps me make decisions and choices about what documents to include. Okay, so now I give them excerpts from the Stamp Act, the Townsend Acts. I have the map of the Proclamation of 1763. And then as the teacher, I make those creative decisions as the creative director on what are the documents that I think would help students the best to develop a viewpoint on the essential question. Let me just take another one very, very quickly. On that first page, all right, number 8. All right, to what extent was colonial America a land of opportunity, liberty, or ordeal and oppression? Or if I wanted to phrase it, another one would be number 6. All right, to what extent was colonial America a democratic society? Okay, what information do the students need to know in order to answer that question? All right, maybe I would give them an excerpt from the Fundamental Orders of Connecticut. Maybe I would give them a reading about the New England town meeting. Maybe I would give them an excerpt from the Mayflower Compact. All right, so these are things which we could use. One more thing quickly. If you go down, I think it's number 36, and that's to what extent did Andrew Jackson advance or retard the cause of democracy? Okay, what information do the students need to know to answer that question? Well, the content is that in the Jackson presidency, there were 3 major issues. There is Indian removal, there's his veto of the bank, and then there's the issue of the tariff. That then leads me to go to those sources to get excerpts, and then that becomes my lesson. And knowing that they have an excerpt on Jackson's veto of the bank, on his speech to Congress on Indian removal, that can help me then decide what kind of learning activities that students will do in the lesson. So the essential question can help drive my choice of source material, and my choice of source material helps drive what learning activities our students will be utilizing in this lesson.
John, thank you so very much for going through that. There's a lot of great feedback on that session, and thank you for recording this little mini session.